I mean, maybe this is as dark as it gets. Hopefully this is darkest before the dawn. It is an election year. I don't know. I don't think it's ever been this bad, but who knows? What is up? My name is Eric. This channel is called Report and Opine. I am back. This, of course, is the epicenter for all of your current and captivating coastal elite chaos. So please hit that subscribe button, like the video, ring the notification bell, leave a comment or two, share this with a friend. Let's go. In more establishment desperation, Nikki Haley has stopped over at the Breakfast Club. I'm not exactly sure why. I guess she is still running for president, but it's over. Nobody likes you. And for you to go to the Breakfast Club and try to shore up the black vote, I mean, they're not going to give you a chance. They're not going to listen to reason. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that Nikki Haley is the most reasonable person on the planet. But do you think that you're going to, I mean, it's kind of become like a humiliation ritual. You're going to go to the Breakfast Club where they're obviously going to call you a racist. They're going to make fun of you. They're going to say, oh, she's not even using her real name. She doesn't believe in racism. We all remember when the ladies of The View, or I guess more accurately, Sunny Hostin, said that she's not even using her real name. And I think one of her co-hosts was pretty quick to point out that Sunny Hostin is also not using her real name.
I'd love to see Nikki Haley. I'd love to see Liz Cheney. I'd love to see
Nikki Haley, the chameleon.
I just want to be careful about critiquing her for going by the name she's always
There's some
gone
of
by.
us that can be chameleons and decide not to embrace our ethnicity so that we can pass.
Sunny, I don't think that's fair.
You go by a different name.
Yeah.
Pretty notably, if I recall correctly, Whoopi Goldberg didn't say anything because Whoopi Goldberg is not her real name. And I think she's even gone on record as to explaining why she changed her name from Karen Jones or Karen Johnson or something mad regular to Whoopi Goldberg in an effort to fit in Hollywood, and it worked. But that's a different story. So Nikki Haley goes to the Breakfast Club, and I predicted this. It wasn't rocket science. It wasn't difficult. But they were going to have an hour-long conversation about race. And I didn't watch the whole thing. Obviously, Charlemagne posted a clip to his Instagram where they talk about race. Here, Charlemagne, the fraud, captions the post. One day, politicians, both Democrat and Republican, will admit the reason they can't speak about racism honestly is because it's not a good electoral strategy. Well, I beg to differ. I think they talk quite a bit about race, right? I mean, they also talk about the sun monster and, Transformers. They have a couple talking points. Of course, bending your baby is the rallying cry right now, but to pretend they don't talk about race is pretty out of touch. But this is what they do. They gaslight, they lie, and I mean, without constantly talking about racism, Charlemagne likely wouldn't have a job. It's also pretty funny, and maybe I missed it. I don't watch the Breakfast Club every single day, but do they talk about Transformers? You don't really talk about that too much because it's likely that maybe your black audience, as it were, is not going to be on board with that, right? So you can't feed them the Transformer agenda. Now, of course, you can go through these comments here, and there are some weirdo bots. Oh, how come she doesn't believe racism, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, dude, Charlemagne is literally sitting on a golden throne asking this woman, why don't you talk about racism more?
Question, when you look at the inequalities in America, in education, home ownership, employment and wealth, healthcare, can you admit that America is systemically and structurally a racist country?
Can you admit, from his golden throne, can you admit that America is systemically and structurally? Meanwhile, Joe Biden literally told you that if you don't vote for him, you're not black, right? So, I mean, if we want to take this narrative, he is literally the structure. Biden is literally the system. He has been in politics probably as long as Charlemagne has been alive. But you don't want to talk to him about that. He's just going to say, boy, why don't you vote for me? My hairy legs. I grew up with roaches, corn pop. I mean, the list goes on of Joe Biden's absolute nonsense. But at the top, especially when it comes to a race baiter like Charlemagne the God, you want to, kind of memory hole. You want to memory hole the whole "you ain't black" thing and foist racism on Nikki Haley, who is insufferable at best, but still better than every single Democrat I can think of.
Systemically and structurally, do you think America is racist? Not the people, not everybody in America.
I don't think America's racist. I think we have racism in America,
and
I think we have cultural issues. But
this is ridiculous. It is absolutely an insufferable race to the bottom. You have this Charlemagne the Fraud, who every now and then, right, a broken clock is right twice a day or whatever. So every now and then he says something that makes sense. But you have a man literally sitting on a golden throne asking this insufferable Republican, how come you don't talk about racism more? I mean, give it a rest, guys. From Now This Politics, they say how Eric Adams is failing New Yorkers. Mayor Eric Adams has proved once again that his allegiance is not to the people of New York City. Well, that's probably true, and I cannot stand Mayor Eric Adams, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but he's probably not as bad as Bill de Blasio. He's definitely not as bad as San Francisco Mayor London Breed. He is certainly not as bad as Oakland Mayor Shang Tao, and I can agree. I mean, even as he is, I mean, the bar is really low. So even if he's not as bad as those awful people, he is still pretty terrible, and I can agree that he is failing New Yorkers, but it is quite obvious that they are seeing this from the complete opposite side of the spectrum, and it doesn't make any sense, right? I mean, you got New York City police officers getting beat up by illegals. They're complaining, they're protesting, they're enrolling in culinary classes so they could be in the back cooking so they can serve up the food to a whole bunch of other illegals who are going to drive it around New York City on illegal scooters, but that's a different story. This woman wants you to believe that while New York City is collapsing, I mean, quite literally, there's stories about buildings collapsing, parking structures, all of that stuff. I mean, quite literally collapsing. She wants you to believe this. Now this Politics reporter apparently wants you to believe that Eric Adams is failing because he's not taking enough care of the prisoners.
Did you know that since Eric Adams became mayor, at least 30 people have died in Rikers? And I say at least because there's no way to definitively know, because since Eric Adams became mayor, the Department of Corrections has also stopped reporting to the public about in-custody deaths altogether. Did you also know that since Eric Adams became mayor, 97% of all stops and searches that have been made by NYPD have been made on Black and brown New Yorkers?
Oh, no, I didn't know. You probably just made that up. But I will let you know that in my experience, after having lived a handful of years in New York City, almost I genuinely, to give her the benefit of the doubt, I will say almost every, because I can't even recall one instance of an interaction with a white cop. Every single time. Flatbush, Brooklyn, downtown Brooklyn, Times Square, Washington Square Park. It's always been a police officer of color. They even wear the turbans or whatever, the sheiks, all that stuff, the beards, which I thought you weren't even supposed to have a beard if you're a police officer, but we're talking about New York City. Different story. She wants you to believe that the New York City Police Department is racist. They're quite literally letting illegal immigrants run roughshod over them and the rest of New York City, and they are not a nice bunch. I know from experience. But while that's all happening, they are not taking enough care of the prisoners, which I assume there's very few of because there's no more crime in New York City, very similar to how there's no more crime in San Francisco. Just let them do whatever they want. No bail, free everybody. I mean, they want to pretend they live in a utopia, but they know the truth. And that's why, for the millionth time, this is obviously much more evil than incompetent.
Which is why the New York City Council passed two bills, one that would end solitary confinement in New York City jails, and the other would require that NYPD report almost every stop and search and the legal justification for those stops and searches to increase NYPD transparency and accountability. But Mayor Eric Adams vetoed both. Thankfully, the New York City Council overrode those vetoes on January 30th to ensure that New Yorkers do not continue to needlessly suffer and die in New York City.
Oh yeah. New Yorkers they shouldn't needlessly suffer in jail. I mean, bro,
I'm triggered.
don't worry about the cost of living. Don't worry about the crime. Don't worry about the collapsing buildings. Worry about the prisoners who are needlessly suffering. All right, back in California, ABC 7 News Bay Area, they say San Mateo County has become the first county in America to recognize loneliness as a public health emergency. I mean, how stupid do they think we are? Ever since Rona, any and everything could be considered a public health emergency. Oh, gun violence, public health emergency. Oh, social media, public health emergency. Up in Portland, they're calling a state of emergency because there's junkies dropping like flies on the street, which is also happening in San Francisco. I think Mayor London Breed even called a state of emergency for that. And then they said, well, we're going to put more police officers, more law enforcement on the street. And the overdoses started to go down. But then the very same city official said, well, we're not sure if there's a correlation there, even though they did it for that specific reason. But that's a different story. Now, in San Mateo County, they are using this Rona methodology of scaring the crap out of people to tell you that loneliness is a public health emergency.
Who wants to say, look, I feel I'm lonely?
With a unanimous vote by the Board of Supervisors,
Yes. Supervisor Canepa? Yes.
San Mateo County has become the first county in America to recognize loneliness as a public health emergency.
We have 45% of the people who find themselves being lonely and that suffer from loneliness.
Supervisor David Canepa introduced the resolution he hopes will spur further action. He says since the pandemic, county statistics have shown loneliness explode among the local population, a trend the country's Surgeon General says is also being seen nationwide.
This is a problem that has been building for decades in our country. COVID certainly worsened it. It poured fuel on the fire, but that fire was burning before.
That wasn't COVID. You guys did this. This is like an SNL sketch if SNL were funny, but a public, I mean, what does that mean, right? You're not going to do anything about it, and you spent the last 3 years scaring the living daylights out of people. Oh, social distance, which anybody, with an IQ above room temperature could see that was all a scam from the very beginning, and then it took a couple years later, they admitted it was arbitrary and nobody really knew where it came from. So you did all that. I mean, even in New York City, on the subway panels, they had the real, the actual NPC face saying, don't talk to people, keep your head down in your book or listen to music, but talking is bad. You could die from that. And now loneliness is an epidemic after you spent the last 3 years telling people that they shouldn't talk to anybody else. You wouldn't even let them go see their loved ones. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And now they're pretending, this is an emergency, even though if that were true, which it is not, but if it were, they still wouldn't do anything about it.
In addition to the countywide resolution, Canepa is also sending a letter to Governor Gavin Newsom. In it, he asks the governor to create a new Minister of Loneliness position for the state. Canepa says while San Mateo County is leading the charge to tackle loneliness here in the U.S., other places like Japan and the U.K. have already taken steps to address the epidemic in their own country.
Oh, this is laughable. So they are basically working towards, obviously it's all about money, we need more bureaucracy. Oh, we need to write a letter to Gavin Newsom so we can create some more nonsense and get some more money, and I continue to let the junkies and homeless people and criminals fester on the streets of San Francisco and big cities in California in general, and also we'll create an entertainment zone where people can drink on the street, so that way they won't be tempted to self-vaccinate under the Bay Bridge in a tent surrounded by needles. Sticking in the Bay Area, of course. After we heard the big In-N-Out story, we had the Kaiser story, basically warning employees not to leave the building during lunch and to have their food delivered, putting the delivery drivers at more risk. That aside, Clorox hires security guards to escort employees downtown. Denny's shuts down for good in Oakland, citing crime concerns. So this is the domino effect. Now, I guess In-N-Out wasn't the first domino. In fact, businesses have been leaving the Bay Area for years now, but that was a huge shock to the system. That was a profitable business. It was a kind of a tourist attraction, right? I mean, In-N-Out is known worldwide as being a California thing. People would come from everywhere. It's right near the airport. I used to stop at that In-N-Out when I would come to Oakland from the airport. In-N-Out was kind of like that first person to leave the party, and then everybody else can say, oh, yeah, time for me to go too. And here we are. And of course, there's loads of these, dozens, if not hundreds of these, but Delirama closing for new concept, Quinn's Lighthouse shuttering after 40 years, a running list of restaurants that have recently closed in Berkeley, Oakland, and beyond. Quite literally, it is all falling apart. Mayor Shang Tao is taking photo ops with iPhone 4 at the police dispatch office or something like that, trying to pretend she's doing something. She's got the golden shovels. It doesn't matter. It's too late, right? It's circling the drain. There's no bringing it back at this particular point in time. Unfortunately, now there's some people trying, and I wish I could be a little bit more optimistic about it, but I just don't see it happening. If they wanted to fix this stuff and started doing everything right yesterday, it would take at least a decade. In more evil media gaslighting, they think we're stupid, and then they wonder why the entire landscape is collapsing. But they say GOP blames Biden for border crisis that GOP refuses to solve. I mean, how could you possibly... How could anybody believe this? It is quite obvious what's happening. They don't want you to remember anything that happened more than 48 hours ago, and now they are trying to claim that the GOP is the ones are the ones responsible for the border crisis. Right? Remember when Kamala Harris was made the quote-unquote border czar? Do we remember that? Right? I mean, this is just ridiculous. They say the GOP seems to be settling on a familiar line of attack for an issue that isn't going away: immigration. Now, I'm old enough to remember when this wasn't even a problem. There was no border crisis. There was no nothing, right? There was kids in cages, and we were, shooting photo ops, crying outside the parking lot. But now, Biden wants to solve it, and the GOP doesn't want to let him solve it. How did we get here? And how can these people wonder why the media landscape is completely collapsing? It's untrustworthy. Nobody is buying it. And just to prove that is all absolutely insane, I mean, they're gaslighting so hard, I'm like, wait, maybe that is the case. Well, obviously it's not. And on day one of his presidency, Joe Biden wrote this proclamation on the termination of emergency with respect to the southern border of the United States and redirection of funds diverted to border wall construction. Reminder: Biden had border security in place when he took office. He killed it day one of his presidency. Now, fast forward a couple of years, and they're saying, well, how come the GOP isn't fixing this? And even if that were the case, even if the GOP were responsible for not fixing the border, what has happened is they have created a problem, and then when you try to fix it, so even if the GOP were to try to fix it, even though you could talk about this border deal that's a complete scam littered with poison pills, but even if they did, the media would then say, well, this is not humane and they're doing it wrong. It will never end, right? You give them an inch, they take a mile. I mean, we created this mess, but why haven't you cleaned it up? And if you did start cleaning it up, we would say that it was racist. From ABC News, Trump spent more than $50 million of his PAC and Super PAC money on legal bills in 2023. They say, amid mounting court battles, former President Donald Trump's legal fees cost his political fundraising committees more than $50 million in 2023, leaving his leadership PAC that once boasted a $100 million war chest with just $5.1 million in the bank entering 2024. Now, I'm no expert. I don't, I'm not a legal expert. I'm not the president. I'm not a politician. But wasn't this part of the plan, right? Everybody knew. We all know that every single one of these weirdo charges is completely fake and fraudulent. Chuck Schumer even said so. And of course, it was built not to. Now, don't get me wrong. They would love to put him in jail. They would love to do the worst to him. But barring that, if they cannot do that, they're trying to break him. So they send all of these completely corrupt Fannie Willis, Letitia James, Alvin Bragg, E. Jean Carroll, and that corrupt lawyer of hers who was defending Andrew Cuomo while also being on the Time's Up board. I mean, this is an incredibly slippery, slimy, disgusting game that they're playing. So, yeah, their whole goal was to drain his funds, and I guess it's working, but we all see it now. Everybody knows. Well, maybe not everybody, which is part of the problem. How did Donald Trump win in 2016 when it was damn near illegal to be a Trump supporter? I mean, you were getting assaulted. You were called all the worst names in the book. Most people weren't even paying attention, but the media was just lambasting anybody who even gave this man a chance. And he won because Hillary Clinton was so awful. Then in 2020, he lost, with it being less taboo to support him. Now in 2024, it is even less taboo to support Donald Trump. And I would say the tables have turned a complete 180. And now we're at the point where if you're, thinking about, quote unquote, voting for Biden, you need to have your head examined. And speaking of, I hadn't even really planned to put this in here, but I just couldn't help it. It's too good.
I'm telling you, listen, let me tell you something. Any of my friends, any of my family, if I see y'all motherfuckers voting for Joe Biden, we gonna have to square up. I don't give a fuck who you is. From male, female, child, we gonna have to square the fuck up. If y'all vote Democrat this year, we gonna have to square the fuck up. Seriously.
Yeah, right? So this wouldn't have happened in 2016. It might have been a little bit more likely to happen in 2020, but now the tables have completely turned, and that's why people are, Snoop Dogg, who literally pointed a toy gun at a doll of Donald Trump, is saying, oh, he's not that bad, because we can see it. The wind is blowing in a certain direction, and Joe Biden, I'm triggered. They are going to have to pull out all the stops, which we're living through right now. In a little transanity news from NBC6, after Florida banned Transformers from obtaining driver's license that reflect their gender identity, one teen is sharing her story. All right, and this is the baseline. I've said this 100 million times, but this is the big ask, right? If you will just blindly believe that someone can change their gender and they should be allowed to change it on their ID, why does my ID not say, I'm Steph Curry. I am the best three-point shooter in the world, in the history of the world. That's me. That's how I identify, right? I mean, you're talking about your driver's license and you just feel like you are deserving of just changing that because you have created this completely false reality. And if anybody buys into this, that's how they know it's going to be a Democrat voter. That's how they know you're not really paying attention. That's how they know you're completely brainwashed, because these things that make absolutely no sense, you'll vote for, you will get behind anyways.
Is 19, a trans woman born and raised in Florida, but she's in the midst of her transition. So,
dog, come on, give it a rest. You put on this weird little purple dress, and we're all. This is laughable.
To get a new driver's license reflecting her new name and gender identity, Lila says she'd have to go to a different state.
It makes me feel frustrated that the place that I was raised no longer accepts people like me.
The director of Florida's Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles said gender is a synonym for sex at birth, and since driver's licenses are used for ID, permitting an individual to alter his or her license undermines the purpose of an identification record and can frustrate the state's ability to enforce its laws.
Absolutely, right? I mean, just make it up. We laughed Rachel Dolezal out the building. You can't be transracial. Again, we see the clips popping up every so often. Oh, if you can change your gender, how come you can't change your race? And then they get stuck. And these people are just demanding that you let them change the information on their identification. And then we saw other clips from the ACLU, like, well, the Transformer saying, I spend a lot of time telling reporters or showing reporters how to report on us because it just becomes all about them. And if one little question is asked, if one little tiny bit of skepticism is shown, then that's going to be a problem. These people are going to cry. And then somebody out there is going to say, if you don't let them do this, then they're going to harm themselves. It's absolutely despicable. And here is a little history on the trend of transanity. So this is a clip from Dave Rubin, who is reacting to a clip from Tucker Carlson. And here is me inceptioning this clip and this guy, this expert, explaining what went down.
In terms of the pace of growth for, let's say, clinics serving pediatric patients on gender issues, in last 15 years in the United States, we had 0 down to over 100 clinics for kids.
So in the last 15 years, they went from 0 to over 100 of these weirdo transformer clinics. And just for the record, this guy's name is, well, obviously that's Tucker, but the man he's talking to is named Chris Moritz. And it gets darker.
Why? It's a very complicated question, and there's a lot of different reasons why. I would say that the biggest single policy catalyst for this explosion is Obamacare. When Obamacare was enacted in 2010, there was a kind of very quietly kind of written into the law a provision in which insurance companies were mandated to provide coverage for what is deemed to be medically necessary gender-affirming care. As a result of that, between 2010 and 2016, there was a 50% increase in sex reassignment surgeries, 25% increase in insurance coverage for transgender individuals. And then at the very end of the Obama administration, 2016, an additional amendment to the Affordable Care Act was made whereby gender identity could no longer be a basis for denial of coverage by private insurance companies. As a result of that, the next year, from 2016 to 2017, there was a 150% increase in sex reassignment surgeries in the United States.
Right, as fast as possible as I'm listening to him. All right, there's so much there. First off, connecting this to Obamacare, that there were provisions in Obamacare starting in 2010 to affirm, right? And it's always that Orwellian language, affirm.
Yes, the peak of the dystopian Democrat doublespeak euphemisms.
Gender identity, even though the least affirming thing you could do is if an 8-year-old boy says I'm girl, it would be unaffirming to say that you're actually a girl. You'd affirm that they're a boy and deal with whatever it is that they're thinking. Oh, I like Barbie and a boy. Okay, well, that's okay. Some boys do that. Maybe he grows up to be a gay man, maybe not, right? Like there are effeminate straight guys, there are straight acting gay guys and all of them.
Yeah, it goes on, but the entire thing is completely diabolical. You don't have to be an expert, you don't have to be a scientist or a doctor to realize that none of those surgeries are going to work. It has become a weirdo money scheme, just like with everything else, right? Like, oh, climate agenda needs more money. Oh, the homelessness needs more money. Oh, we need more money to cut the junk off kids and sell it to China.
Yeah, I'm not gonna get my dick cut off and sold to China, spend the rest of my life on a treadmill like this guy. What?
It's about power and control, because on the one hand, if anybody buys into this agenda, you know you have control of their brain. And on the other hand, it is a way to make money. Maybe this is as dark as it gets. Hopefully this is darkest before the dawn. It is an election year. I don't know. I don't think it's ever been this bad, but who knows? It wasn't quite this crazy in 2020. It was pretty bad in 2016. And everybody thought, oh, well, obviously Hillary Clinton is going to win this. And then in 2020, after she didn't, they pulled out all the stops to make sure that didn't happen again. But I don't know. We all see it now. Will voting be enough? Probably not. Or will the machine just continue to steamroll everybody with this weirdo agenda that nobody wants? They have to take their foot off the gas and come up with a plan that somebody likes. All that said, I do have a funny clip.
Do you like karaoke?
Yeah.
It's good, you know? Something to do at night. There's nothing to do at night. What can you do at night? Bowling, movies. It's like a third thing to do after bowling and the movies. I don't know if you bowl or not. I don't go that often. But it's fun. It's fun. You can't find a ball. That's the problem. I don't know. Maybe you own a bowling ball. I don't own a bowling ball. My whole life, every time I'm in a bowling alley, sticking my fingers in all these holes, picking up the balls. You got to get your own ball. I don't bowl enough, I think, to get my own ball. It takes up a lot of space in the house. You're looking at it in the closet going, what am I doing with a bowling ball? I don't even bowl. You know what I mean? So you don't want to get rid of the ball. How do you get rid of a bowling ball? Think about that. Who do you give a bowling ball to? Nobody bowls. It only fits your fingers. You throw a bowling ball in the garbage can, you know what that sanitation man's going to do? He's going to knock on your door. That's how upset he's going to be. He's going to say, who the fuck put a bowling ball in the garbage can? Okay. All right. I'm around town.